If there's one thing I'm clear about, it's that wholeness has nothing to do with perfection or kind of getting your act together. It has to do with your ability to embrace all that you are, to embrace your brokenness as part of your wholeness. It's paradoxical, but it's true. And I'm all of the above. You know, I am my successes and I'm my failures. I am my light and I am my darkness. I am my gifts and I'm the potholes I've fallen into.
Welcome to the Guest House. I'm Shawn Parell.
And I'm David Keplinger.
And this season, we are exploring a term that Emily Dickinson uses to describe the essence of practice. She called it our gem tactics.
She's talking about how our spiritual, artistic, and intellectual inquiries shape the way we meet each other and move through the world.
This season, our guests from various arenas of creative mastery are going to share with us how they have refined their gem tactics and thus their engagement with life.
Thank you all for being here. Parker Palmer is a national treasure. His writings on community, teaching, and healing the divided life have touched countless readers as well as participants in his talks and programs over more than 50 years in the public eye. His books have sold over 2 million copies. Parker holds a PhD from UC Berkeley and 14 honorary doctorates, and he's the founder and Senior Partner Emeritus of Center for Courage Renewal. Among my favorites of his many books are The Courage to Teach, A Hidden Wholeness, Healing the Heart of Democracy, and On the Brink of Everything. His Substack is called, after a line by Rilke, Living the Questions. Welcome to the Guest House, Parker Palmer.
Oh, thank you, David. It's so good to be with you, and it's so good to be with Shawn. You're an old friend. Shawn is a new friend, and it's just wonderful to be together today.
Can I ask how you two met?
Yeah, and I'm going to have to rely on you for that, David, because at 86, everything happened yesterday, and it's all mooshed together. So
I have a special memory of this because I was reading Let Your Life Speak, and I was so moved by that book that I wrote you an email and said, I'm a friend of Mary Oliver's. Can I take you to lunch? And at the time, I was living in Washington, D.C., and you were in Madison, Wisconsin. And you wrote back and said, well, any friend of Mary Oliver's is a friend of mine. So, yeah, you can take me to lunch. And I booked a flight to Madison, and you invited me over to your house. And you and Sharon sat and talked with me for 4 hours. It was an incredible moment of openness, and I'll never forget it.
yeah, I remember that very well. It was such a wonderful, wonderful day, and a friendship developed that has never stopped happening.
I also remember that I was sick. I was on Sudafed or something like that, so I think I was especially zippy that day. And
well, having
that
been, I did my graduate work at Berkeley. I thought you were just one of us. I didn't know.
That's a great meeting start. So just to clarify, David, did you just said, may I take you to lunch, or can we have lunch together? Not like, may I fly all the way?
No. I didn't say anything about where I was. I thought maybe that would dissuade Parker from agreeing to this. So I went right in with, can I buy you lunch? Yeah.
I'm glad you did.
I'm glad I did too. And I wanted to ask you, going way back to some of your earlier writing, I wanted to ask you about the divided life. I had been reading some Joseph Brodsky essays recently, and Brodsky says in one of his essays that consciousness begins with the telling of the first lie. And what he means by that is that it's our feeling of self-consciousness, our feeling of I'm in here and they're out there, begins with the telling of the first lie. And it reminded me so much of what you were writing about the divided life.
Could you tell us a little bit about when the divided life materialized in your own experience?
What an interesting question. I'm glad to talk about it because there's a mystery there that I don't understand. Um, Over the years, I've wondered how books written by a straight, white, well-off, well-educated male human being in America have reached into the lives of Black women, the LGBTQ community, of folks in radical social change situations, as my books have. And when I've talked to such folks about it, they've said, well, it's obvious to us, it should be obvious to you. We all wrestle with the divided life. We all wrestle with being people who aren't supposed to show up as we really are in the world. And and when someone like you says that's been a problem for me too, it it's meaningful. It's encouraging. It means we can join hands on this search to live divided no more. And I think for me, uh, I suspect that it goes way, way back to the fact that in school, in grade school and in high school, I was a very popular kid. I wasn't a good student. I went to a high school where there were 500 people in my class, and I graduated with a C plus average, just smack dab in the middle of the class. Wasn't a good student. I didn't party. I got elected head of the student council or class president every year. So I was popular in that sense. But the thing I wanted most to do after school was to be alone. I wanted to go home to the old 1895 house in which we lived in this Chicago suburb and go up to the third floor, the attic room that was mine, make model airplanes, write little stories, just hide out. And that was my inward reality, but the outward reality was this hail fellow, well met, gregarious, good guy. So that extended as the first person in my family to go to college. I did pretty well in college once I met a couple of professors who lighted my spark and or who sparked my life. And because of them, I thought, okay, I guess I'm meant to uh, pursue a life in the academy. So I went ahead and got a PhD, but it was at Berkeley, and I remember everything from Berkeley in truth. And it, of course, was an era of political assassinations and the Vietnam War and America's persistent perennial crisis around racial injustice, and the cities were burning. And the day I got my PhD in hand, I decided that the academy was not for me. I wanted to become a community organizer, and I did. I went to Washington, D.C. to do that work for the next 5 years. And from there, just pursued this very meandering path of trying to find out what's the truest expression of my life, because to that point, I had not found it. And I think all of that, David, was driven by this sense that whatever this thing was that was calling inside of me, that that said, no, you don't. I don't want you in the classroom. I want you out on the streets. But why and to what end and what skills with what skillful means. I was trying to bring it all together, and I've often said that my sense of vocation didn't really become coherent until I was 50 years old. So when I talk to young people who are, 24, 25, and they tell me they can't figure out what they want to do with their lives, I just say, hell, you got another 25 years. Relax, we'll figure it out together.
It's great comfort to hear that. I don't know.
Up,
It
up.
is. It's like, and also it points to the willingness to not define, truncate parts of ourselves that haven't yet emerged or come into their fullest fruition.
Yeah, I think if you pay attention to your life, you can always find these little green shoots coming up hither and yon, and you don't know what they mean. The question is, are you going to nurture them? Are you going to take them seriously and see what they might grow into? Or are you, do you feel like the hound of heaven is chasing you down the halls of time and you, you, you've got to get it done now?
We recently interviewed Rosemary Watola Tromer, the wonderful poet. And she said, on the topic of poets being told that they had to discover their voice, she said, "Oh, but really, I think we have to discover how to listen, right? Instead of developing our voice, we have to actually really learn to listen." And I think this is just such a interesting and um, play with the notion of vocation related to voice, but also through the process of listening. And I wonder, what you might have to share on the notion of vocation as you've observed it.
Well, I love Rosemary's work, and I love what she said about listening. I guess in Let Your Life Speak, I tried to strike the theme, if I can even remember my own line, before you try to tell your life what you want to do with it, listen to what it is that your life wants to do with you. So I wrote that book 25 years ago, and it was then clear to me that life was always trying to deliver some kind of message to me about direction, about not not a fixed goal, not a destination I needed to get to, but about some kind of intentionality around which to organize my living. And the question for me became, how can I externally manifest as much as possible this kind of inward conviction? There was an intentionality there that my life had a tropism, like a plant, towards certain forms of light. And how can I arrange my external words and actions in a way to allow my life to lean in that direction? So, Gandhi titled his autobiography "My Experiments with Truth," and I really love that that title, um, because he's saying, in effect, that you try this, you try that. Some experiments work, some don't. If you're in an experimental mindset, akin to that of a scientist, you know that you generally learn a lot more from failed experiments than from those that succeed, because now you can eliminate some variables, whereas a successful experiment doesn't necessarily reveal all the variables that may be at work. So even failure, which we do constantly on the vocational path, uh, becomes a source of clues about direction, about intentionality. So listening became a very big thing for me. I think that's one of the things that drew me when I was 35 years old toward Quakerism, um, which is a form of Christianity that a lot of people don't know much about. People tell me they like our oatmeal, but of course
Oh my goodness.
we we don't make it, so there's not much left to talk about. But in the Quaker form of religion, which I ascribe to, there are no clergy, so there's nobody setting the pace of the congregation. Everything is done communally, and that includes what Quakers call worship, which is sitting in silence together and listening for whatever voice may be speaking inwardly or outwardly and trying to sort and sift among the many voices that most of us have within us. Uh, that's always the tricky part, isn't it? About listening for the inner teacher, or for one's deepest truth. We have lots of voices inside us. At least I do. We have voices of fear. We have voices of envy. We have voices of greed and anger, as well as something that is constantly trying to point us toward true north. So community has been as important for me as solitude and silence in trying to sort and sift those voices. I don't want a community in which somebody else is telling me how to live. That's not community, that's totalitarianism. Um, I want a community of people who are willing to openly share their own journeys in a way that offers each other clues about how to discern the true from the false.
And these are called circles of trust in your.
Yeah, in the work I do, I've taken the Quaker form of community and translated it into circles of trust, which is the model that we use at the Center for Courage and Renewal to do our retreats. Yes, exactly.
Hey friends, Shawn here with an invitation to join me next September 20th to the 26th, 2026, for a contemplative yoga and meditation retreat along the breathtaking coast of County Cork, Ireland. Our setting will be Ballymaloo House, which is a world-class cooking school and country manor, and every day we will find rhythms of deep practice and nourishment and rest and rejuvenation. I hope you will join me there. All the details are at shawnparell.com/Ireland. You share, I must listen for the truths and the values at the heart of my own identity, not the standards by which I must live, but the standards by which I cannot help but live if I am living my own life. It's really two levels. One is listening really profoundly into the silence that is at the center of our own life, that is really the intelligence of, this being human. And then also the level of, well, how is it that you, Parker, in your contemplative practice, and you, David, in your contemplative practice, and me, Shawn, in my contemplative practice, then can step into a field together where we are cultivating the kind of weave, the kind of like mycelium of listening to each other.
I think, the way you set that up, Shawn, is so beautiful, because those are the clues I would need to come into community with you and David. The fact that you see the search that way, and that you're not looking to me for answers, and I'm not looking to you for answers. We're looking to walk hand in hand into a mystery, or at least side by side into a mystery that none of us pretends to understand now or ever be able to understand. Um, I love Rilke's definition of love, that love is this: that two solitudes border, protect, and salute one another. That's the kind of community I'm talking about, of people who respect their own and each other's solitude and the fruits that can come from it, enough to know how to hold each other in that solitude, while not making solitude just an effort to survive loneliness, which is what solitude becomes in its degenerative form. But held in community, solitude becomes this rich exploratory experience where you're bordering, protecting, and saluting each other as you go. That's what we try to replicate in our circles of trust. That's what Quaker meetings try to replicate. We do it with some very simple ground rules, like whatever you hear in this circle, there shall be no fixing, no saving, no advising, and no correcting each other. And what that leaves as options with each other is deep listening on the one hand, and then the art of asking honest, open questions that aren't little advices in disguise, which help hear people into speech. It's a phrase I love from a feminist theologian named Nell Morton, that our task is to hear each other into deeper and deeper speech. And we can do that not only with deeply attentive listening, but with the honest, open questions that may be as simple as, you said you were angry. Can you say more about how that felt?
So much of what you say brings me back to what makes a poetry workshop, for example, work well, especially about the fixing and correcting. We think when we go into a workshop that we're here to collectively help someone get it right, you know? And so the students start suggesting that this line be changed to that, or the poem should look differently, or the poem, but really that is largely an unsuccessful route. If the student tries to do what the workshop tells them collectively, they'll destroy the poem. It'll just disappear in their hands. So there's got to be another way to do this. And what I've discovered is that it's to create this circle of trust where we are all plants, like you say, with our own tropism, and we're moving toward together toward a certain light, which is the light of the inner teacher. And I was reading you, and I was teaching poetry classes, and reading you and teaching poetry classes, and I, for a long time, I didn't see that's what I was doing. So I have you to thank for that, because that little shift helped me so much to help the students do what they came to do without feeling like there was a specific answer that they were missing. And I was the teacher, and I was there to tell them what that was. And I love what you say about the soul being shy and needing indirection. Sometimes the soul needs a metaphor. And so on the converse side of that, it seems that poetry has been for you a powerful way to coax the soul forward.
Oh, absolutely true, David. And knowing you and other poets has really helped that along. You know, I, I go back to, people ask me why I became a writer, and I think the honest to God answer is I was born baffled. You know, I, ca- I came into the world, they slapped a little. Yeah, exactly. They slapped a little air into my lungs, and I looked around and I said, "What? Well, what's all this about?" You know? And I've been asking that question ever since. And what writing does for me, and poetry does this big time, is it helps me peel back the next level of bafflement, to a point where I have at least, a working grasp on reality, on realities that get obscured by conventional culture, which is sort of what conventional culture is all about. It's all about obscuring the reality of our lives. Um, but poetry has this amazing quality that I think our friend Emily Dickinson named when she said, "Tell the truth, but tell it slant." And when you look at things, out of the corner of your eye, rather than running headlong at them like academics love to do, like rationality loves to do, you look at things out of the corner of your eye. You see stuff that you don't see otherwise. Just as astronomers say, you can see dim stars in the heavens without, out of the corner of your eye, that you can't see when you're looking directly at them, because the corner has more receptors in it, apparently, something along those lines. So Poetry does that for me, and I've found over the years that when you peel back one level of bafflement, there's yet another waiting to be peeled back. So there's no end to writing poems and books and anything you want that may help just a little for the moment with your own bafflement. But that's kind of my permanent condition is bafflement.
On that note, could I ask you to read a poem that you brought? It's one of your own poems, Harrowing.
Yeah, sure, I'd love to. So this is a poem that came from one of several passages in my life into really profound clinical depression. So just to set the stage a little, um, I've been there 3 times in my adult years, twice in my 40s and once in my 60s. And as everyone knows who is familiar with the language of depression, I'm not talking about periods of sadness or just sort of feeling down and out. I'm talking about months long um, deep dives into a form of non-existence. A sense that the self has disappeared. I used to talk about this as getting lost in the dark. And then I realized that metaphor really didn't work at all, because if you're lost in the dark, there's a difference between you and the darkness. And you can feel around in the darkness for maybe a window shade or a door handle or a light switch or something that will bring you a little relief. But the depression I'm talking about is metaphorically more like having become the dark. So there's no difference between you and the darkness. And there's nothing to do but be it. Um, no room for negotiation. And out of that comes the mystery of, how does that closed system ever crack open? For some people, it never does. Depression is absolutely exhausting, day in and day out, of not knowing if you can get through another day of this non-existence. But the mystery is why some people not only survive, but then thrive. And this is a poem that came to me in the middle of one of my depressions, a poem called Harrowing. I had gone to Kentucky, actually, to visit a friend of mine who was a Roman Catholic sister at the mother house of her community, where they offered retreats. And she served as a kind of novice master and was willing to meet with me an hour a day in spiritual guidance and counseling, which I desperately needed from somebody I deeply trusted, because this is not easy stuff to talk about. And there I was in the middle of this rural Kentucky site, and I went for a walk one day. I remember an overcast day, out down this country road where there was no traffic whatsoever, but on both sides of me there were plowed fields. And having a little bit of farming in my ancestry, my grandparents grew up on farms, I knew that there's a word to describe these fields, and the word is harrowed. These fields have been harrowed, which means that a disc plow has been dragged through them to break up the sod before a finer plowing then precedes the actual planting of seeds. And I just, something in me was still alive to language at that time, which is so interesting to me, that a word or an image or a metaphor can work through that profound darkness, that sense of annihilation, and spark just a little something. I sort of feel like it sparks the soul. It feeds the soul in some mysterious way. So I recognized that these fields had been harrowed, and that I was experiencing a harrowing passage in my life. And slowly, the first part of the poem came pretty quickly, and then I worked on it over the next few days, and it became one of the most important therapeutic processes that I engaged in while I was there, and that continued to engage me over the next couple months, and that contributed to my healing, contributed to me being able to come out of this particular depression, not only having survived, but beginning again to thrive. So here's the poem, Harrowing. The plow has savaged this sweet field, misshapen clods of earth kicked up, rocks and twisted roots exposed to view, last year's growth demolished by the blade. I have plowed my life this way, turned over a whole history, looking for the roots of what went wrong, until my face is ravaged, furrowed, scarred. Enough. The job is done. Whatever's been uprooted, let it be seedbed for the growing that's to come. I plowed to unearth last year's reasons. The farmer plows to plant a greening season.
It's beautiful. I read this poem first years ago, but the moment that really grabs me is the second stanza, when you leap from the description to "I have plowed my life this way." You're literally doing what you're describing with the soul, taking the metaphor of the harrowing and making it a mirror
Mhm.
to look back at yourself, looking for the roots of what went wrong until my face is ravaged, furrowed, scarred. Did you know that that was going to happen when you wrote the poem, or was it the metaphor saying there's something I have to tell you, just trust me? And did it lead you in that way?
It was the latter, to the extent that I can understand it. It was the metaphor speaking to me, or a voice that spoke to me in metaphor, from somewhere deep inside, that in itself was a sign of life that I hadn't had for quite a while. You know, when you're in depression, it the the terror is not that you feel bad, it's that you can't feel anything. You're numb, you're dead, um, in your body, in your mind, in your heart. People can say, "Well, it's a beautiful day outside, just enjoy the sunshine." You can't enjoy anything. And so to realize that I could enjoy a word, that I could enjoy an image, that I could track something outside of my own misery, was so life-giving in that in the moment that this emerged. And I say a moment because there was an instant when, boom, something formed in me, but then it was an extended moment as I worked through the lines and began to track the metaphor more faithfully. And I think, I don't know how it is, of course, for all poets, and I'm sure it's different for different folks, but for me, there comes a clue, and then the question is, do I have the attentiveness? I was going to say the faith, but it's really the attentiveness to follow that clue. Um, can I just pay attention to a voice that our culture sort of says, "Oh, piffle, don't listen to that silly stuff, you know, listen to what the important people are saying." Make money, make friends, or you will die of despair. I think I'm quoting Shawn Tzu at that point, the Taoist teacher, but who spoke that way sarcastically or ironically. But, do I have the attentiveness to take my own this inner voice that is both me and not me seriously? When I looked in the mirror back at the time I wrote that poem, my face was ravaged, furrowed, scarred. I mean, I was a mess, and I showed it in my face. Everything about me was devastation. I had lost weight. I moved slower than I do. I was in my around 50 or so. I moved slower than I do today at age 86, and I looked more skeletal. I was really down to the nub. And so a hopeful poem like this coming from that me, no way. But there was something, a voice in me that was me, uh, that that soul, that spark of life, that wild animal back in the thickets who has very little to eat, but like a wild animal knows how to survive on thin air. Speaking a word which I followed, and I sometimes think that the most important line that I've ever written is that one word line at the beginning of the third stanza where I say, enough, just enough, Yeah, yeah. It's like, okay, what are you trying to prove? You
There's something about Suzuki Roshi who says, what is enlightenment? Enlightenment is being able to say there's nothing wrong here.
yeah.
And I love the way that you move in this poem from really looking for the roots of what went wrong to enough,
Mhm,
like
mhm,
enough,
mhm,
you know? And then further, tracking forward in time, an embrace of wholeness that includes the brokenness, right? That is integral, that is not somehow having, you know, fixed or gotten over or, banished the shadow parts, but and this too. Yes, there's nothing wrong here.
yeah, yeah. I love that way of putting it. That's what opens you to planting a greening season, as the poem instructed me to do. If there's one thing I'm clear about, it's that wholeness, which we talk about a lot in certain circles in our society, wholeness has nothing to do with perfection or kind of getting your act together. It has to do with your ability to embrace all that you are, to embrace your brokenness as part of your wholeness. It's paradoxical, but it's true. And as soon as I can say to myself and I think to the larger world in appropriate ways, yeah, I'm all of the above. I am my successes and I am my failures. I am my light and I am my darkness. I am my gifts and I'm the potholes I've fallen into more than once in my life. One of my reflections in old age is that I can't imagine a sadder way to die. I mean, I can imagine painful ways to die, but I can't imagine a sadder way to die than realizing as you took your last breaths that you never showed up in this world as who you really were. That you had one life, um, in which just to say to the world, here I am, um, and I am all of the above, and you never did that. Um, that seems terminally sad to me. And poetry gives us a way to show up that I think, you know, it goes beyond performative. Um, It goes beyond humble brag or whatever these these sick distortions of online expression are that we're just sort of drowning in these days. And it tells the truth, and it tells it slant, and it tells it in a way, poetry does, that gives other people access to their own version of that. I don't know the road for all depressed people. I barely figured out the road for myself. But I do know that when we share our stories as openly and honestly as we can, and poetry is one way of doing that, there's therapy in the sense of well-being, health for everyone who drinks from that well.
And I really want to name that the generosity of spirit with which you have, shared from the depths of your own experience and really like how your own metabolic process around depression. I'm sure that it wasn't just from the moment, but in the years following, and your ability to um to turn back meaningfully in a way that has supported so many people. Because I do think that sometimes in a place where there's no way to reach out of it, sometimes just feeling some presence move toward us, right? So your words, someone out there being able to say, "Oh, I know what this is like."
So,
Um, that kind of quality of tender presence, of just feeling a little less alone
mhm.
in one's own, despair, can be such a profound gift.
Thank you. That means a lot to me if that's the case. Um, we're given these hard experiences, these wounds, and the question is, what do we do with them? And I think the to hear yourself being called somehow to the role of a wounded healer, someone who's been there, done that, and lived to tell the story, um, is is profoundly therapeutic for one who has been wounded. Um, that is me, to be able to make meaning out of an experience that seemed otherwise meaningless by knowing that talking as honestly as I can about it is of service to someone else. That's deeply healing. So thank you for
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Do you think, Parker, that we are living in extraordinary times, and for young people, there is no way to gain any kind of context from the past in order to know how to live under our current conditions? I mean, with technology, but also with environmental collapse and the kinds of regimes under which we live. These truths are still pertinent and still good, but for a young person who's trying to decide what to do with their life at 25, the pressure from all around is to do it now, A, because the world is ending, and B, because the world honors the young and throws away the old. Do you have any thoughts about this?
Well, I want to smile for a moment and just say, listen to everything Leonard Cohen ever wrote. And his wonderful song, Democracy, I think it is, where he says, I'm like those plastic bags that are just trash on the sea, but I'm not going away, you know, and you're going to hear from me. So, yeah, old people need to push back and say, no, I'm still here. You're going to have to reckon with me. Sorry. Which is the way I feel about politics. I've reached out in my life constantly to folks younger than me, wanting to assist, encourage, companion, and learn from them, because there's so much to learn. And to pay forward the fact that I got a lot of encouragement from a lot of elders when I was younger. And I think it's very clear to me that I don't know the answer to their problems. If they see me as some kind of vocational counselor, I'm going to fail them. But what we all need is companionship on wherever this journey is taking us. And there's so much beautiful energy that flows between an 86-year-old guy and a 45 or 35 or 25-year-old person who's confused and trying to find a path and finding a lot of roadblocks in his or her way. The positive energy that flows in those relationships, is no accident. I mean, it's life-giving, and it's up to something good. What exactly, I don't know. I can imagine out of a time like ours, new forms of community emerging. People have done academic studies, thoughtful academic studies about how in times of crisis, historically, there have been these great uprisings of experiments in communal life, and all that has been learned from them about what the next round of experimentation might look like. And I hear younger people talking about that, about co-housing and cooperative housing and other forms of being together, including creating their own health insurance pools. I mean, there's no end, I think, to the social imagination that human beings can bring to a situation like this. So I'm, I'm just not, I'm not ready to throw in the towel at all. While I recognize the absolute truth in what you're saying, David, about the signs of end times. But there was the Black Plague, and there was this, and there was that. And there was my own era of coming to age politically, when suddenly admired political and social change leaders were dropping dead from assassins' bullets, and a war was raging that nobody wanted, but nobody seemed able to stop. And racial injustice had reached a new low, or a recurrent low in our society. So to some extent, we've been there before, and we know a few things about what we need to do to move ahead. And I do keep my eye on the resurgence of community in various forms, which is, part of what's happening right now in the United States anyway, around the fascist or crypto-fascist regime under which we're living.
Parker, we have, as I kind of comb through this conversation, I think there are so many gem tactics to be gleaned from all that you've shared with us. And just on this note of, what does it mean today to begin, like like you said, the green growth, like the new, to cultivate community? Like, what does that even mean? And so I wonder if you would speak a little bit about what you share of habits of the heart that support the cultivation of safe, supportive, enriching community.
Yeah, this is from my book, Healing the Heart of Democracy, which was written back in 2011, sort of before the big kahuna hit. But it was clearly, it was clearly coming, right?
Prescient. It was.
Yeah.
Prescient book.
And in that book, I tried to identify 5 habits of the heart. So number 1 is understanding that we're all in this together. And if that's the case, all is a big word, and there's a lot of us. And so we have to go to habit number 2, which is learning to value otherness, because not everybody that's in this together looks like us, thinks like us, acts like this, or is anywhere in our orbit. And so we have to value otherness. We have to have that beginner's mind that says, maybe there's something here for me to learn, rather than immediately declaring an enemy. Number 3 follows from that one, which is to learn to hold the tension of opposites, to hold conflict creatively. Um, I, I don't know that I would have learned anything in my life if I hadn't been willing to embrace the conflict of yes and no, right, wrong, this and that, of turning that encounter with otherness into an opportunity to grow my own mind and heart, which is what I mean by creative tension holding. I think the 4th habit of the heart that comes out of that is reclaiming a sense of voice and agency. And now I'm talking about social, political voice and agency. What I like to say sometimes is that if I had to boil down the 5 habits to 2, it would be we need to cultivate chutzpah and humility. So the chutzpah to know that we have a voice that's worth speaking and something that's worth saying, and the humility to know that it's not the only voice in town, and we need to learn to listen. And then the 5th habit is creating community, because none of this can be a solo act. And I think, wouldn't it be wonderful if our civics curricula in this country were not all about the names of dead people and places when things happened and dates of historic significance? Sure, some of that, some basic facts are very handy. But wouldn't it be wonderful if our civics curricula were all about these habits of the heart, which we need to learn to build the infrastructure under a democracy that is worthy of the name.
Yeah, these are the gem tactics of really civic healing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good way to put it.
You say in your poem, Everything Falls Away, that there's a thread, and that comes from William Stafford, but there's a thread that doesn't change. Even though everything falls away and falls behind us, there is this one thread that lives forever. And it's reminiscent of what you're talking about, that there is this awareness that we can carry into every moment, which is really us. And all of the other things that we think are us are just part of the set. And you just bring that to every conversation, Parker. You've every conversation around your table with Sharon, and every conversation in front of crowds of people, you bring yourself. And Shawn and I are sitting here with you. I actually feel like I'm in the room with you, which is such a difficult thing to pull off remotely. And so we're just so grateful for you and for your time.
Oh, I'm so grateful for this, for being in the room with the two of you. It's really been lovely. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And whatever you're doing, just keep on doing it. It's good stuff. It's good stuff. Isn't the ultimate gem tactic to be the gift of you in the world? That's why you're here, and that's what you're doing. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much for joining. If these conversations resonate for you, we'd be so grateful if you'd like, subscribe, or leave a review wherever you listen. This work is freely offered, but paid subscriptions make it possible.
You can also check out our work at davidkeplingerpoetry.com and shawnparell.com. You'll find both links in the show notes. Until next time, take good care of yourselves and each other.